Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Second podcast in quick succession, but glad you're back. Today we have Miss Eva. How do you say your last name?
Maxine.
Maxine. Okay, Eva Maxine. She is a incredible singer, and we're excited to have her with us today. Kind of go into a little bit as to who you are, what your style is, and tell us just a short synopsis of who you are and what you do.
I'm a utility player in Nashville, Tennessee. I moved to Nashville about 9 years ago, and I've been playing music full time since then. I work on Lower Broadway and do a fair amount of utility stuff for other artists. And I've got my own stuff, my own artist project that I really started leaning into in the last year-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Putting songs out, material, and yeah, it's a fun time.
Yep. So guys, if you are enjoying the content here on the channel, make sure you drop a comment down below. If you guys want to see more really cool singers like Miss Eva here, make sure you drop their names in the comments or shoot me a message of who you want to see next. And without further ado, Eva, you ready to let everybody know how your music journey went and how you got to where you got?
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I see that you have your mug there. Would you like to share what you are sipping on today?
Definitely something super fancy that I didn't make in a Keurig with a coffee pod. For sure. It's got almond milk creamer. Fancy.
Hey, do you sidetrack? Or do you do like any sweetened milk, or you do like unsweetened almond?
It depends on the day. This one is sweetened.
I got you. Vanilla
Yes.
or
Vanilla. Yep.
That's some good stuff. Today this has been a tradition of mine. I just haven't brought it back in a while. I always drink ginger ale.
Ah, nice.
Boylan's ginger ale. So
That's one of my go-tos on stage.
Oh yeah, ginger
Yeah. Ginger ale. You can like feel like you're participating without actually having to add alcohol.
ale. Yeah. So I'm gonna bend over real quick and pick up this thing because I decided to drop it on the floor in the middle of a podcast. So, but this is Boylan's brand. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's really good.
I don't think so.
Focus. Cane sugar and all that stuff. Is it backwards for you?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. It's really good. You can get it just about anywhere.
Nice. I'll have to give that a shot.
Yep. All right. So, in short, I know you kind of went briefly into what you do as far as your musical career and your life on social media, but something that I wanted to kind of dive into in all of my podcasts whenever I have a guest on is kind of share, like, in short-ish form, what got you into music, or how did you realize you had that singing talent within you?
So I don't know how deep your dive was on Instagram, but I grew up in South Dakota on a ranch and on a buffalo ranch. And there was not a lot to do out there. But I grew up, my whole family played music. None of them necessarily played professionally, but there was always music around churches, nursing homes, county fairs, all that kind of stuff. And I started, my parents started me on violin lessons when I was 6.
Violin?
Yeah, that's my first instrument.
That's a really good first instrument.
Yeah.
I think I might have had like only one or two guests that have claimed the violin as their first so far.
Yeah. It set me up super well, I think, because it is I would say one of the most difficult instruments to play and the most frustrating. So frustrating. But I think that it did, and I was so young that I, maybe didn't realize how much it was like at that moment.
Strings have always seemed like a bit of a complicated instrument to me.
Yeah, anything fretless is going to be, really getting that ear training and intonation is a beast. So
I'd like to know from a former violin player what makes it frustrating, because I personally have never played it, so I'd be curious to know.
I think it's so easy to not sound good.
Oh
That's
yeah.
true. Like, like piano is kind of the instrument that I probably spend the most amount of time on now. And same with guitar, like as long as you're in tune, your guitar's tuned up, like there's like a grid that you follow, right?
Hmm.
And when it's a fretless instrument, there's no grid, and you just kind of gotta feel where the note, you know, and getting that down. There's just a lot more to think about for me playing violin personally versus, something like piano where it's like, oh, this note is not going to be sharp or flat. I mean, unless it is a sharp or flat, but like it's not going to be in between, you know?
Yeah, and it's the fretless string instruments have always stressed me out a little bit, coming from a someone that likes to pick on guitar. Not that
Yeah.
good, but yeah, it's always stressed me out, like just looking at it.
I've played violin for many, many years, 2 decades, and uh, it still stresses me out. So join the club.
I know it. So, this is a good segue into one of the other questions that I have on the podcast, and I don't really have any specific order that I ask these in, but I kind of
Okay.
ask them as they come up. But, do you play any other instruments outside of violin and piano?
Yeah. So violin was my first instrument. I picked up piano and guitar in high school. And actually, so back in the day, I was part of a family trio and called Ziona Road. And my sister played violin, my brother played guitar, and kind of when I started playing piano more because I was like, I wanted to do the thing that they weren't doing.
Yeah.
And but I think that between those three being kind of my first instruments, every other instrument is basically like, unless it's like a horn, which I don't play any horns, but like, mandolin is strung the same as a violin, but it's played like a guitar, So it's like you can kind of figure out. I play banjo as well, and um, but every other instrument's just kind of a married version of something else, you know.
In short form, it sounds like you could just about play any song in a standard blue, or like any instrument in a standard bluegrass band.
I was from a big homeschool family, so that's pretty standard for that.
I didn't know how prevalent all of those instruments were in South Dakota.
Yeah, I think it's just like the big musical family thing. They're just around. We always had something laying around. Like whether it was a guitar or mandolin or piano or violin or my brother plays cello. I try to mess around on that a little bit, but like I would say violin, guitar, and piano are my three instruments that I, say I take gigs on. But then every now and then someone's like, "Hey, we need banjo for one song," and I'm like, "Ah, do that, sure."
So with that in mind, that brings me to another question that I am now curious about. With you having come from a little bit more of like a country-esque style, bluegrass style of background, when did that translate into more of an interest in the kind of music that you perform now?
Um, I grew up on almost exclusively old country and a lot of more gospely hymns kind of things.
Sure, yeah.
So I when I moved to Nashville, I figured out who Foo Fighters were, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then I don't know, that just got into a Paramore phase and all this in like late high school. Big fan of Hailstorm through high school, and they were a huge influence on me being like country music's cool, and I still respect country music, and I love the writing and stuff behind it, but the stuff that you know playing live, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Can the drums
Yeah.
be louder? Can we get more distortion on the guitar? You know, does a
uh,
guitar fit in this?
is a guitar fit? I feel like everybody had a Paramore phase at some point.
Yes. Clearly, I'm still going through mine.
I was gonna say it. I can see a little bit of resemblance, I guess.
I get, yeah, she's referenced a lot at my gigs. I think it's just because it's female singer with crazy hair, but she's great. I'm okay with people comparing me to that because she's wonderful.
So your style of music, and I did want to make mention of this. Your style of content and music kind of reminds me of Gina Carano, I think. Are you familiar with her? She
Uh-uh.
has dark hair with like green stripes in it. Um,
Oh, maybe did she do a video with David Michael Frank once?
yes, yes.
Yes, I've seen her. I've seen her, but I don't know her. I've never done a dive on that.
I've I feel like her music reminds me of yours and vice versa just a little bit, just the
Cool.
general style. So I just had to mention that for
I'll have to check
um
her out.
it's just you got I put all you guys in a certain like kind of genre and I'm like, okay, I'm in this mood. I want to listen to this kind of music and then I just kind of rotate. So, I was just like I
Nice.
had to make mention of that. The
That's cool.
I had another question I was going to ask, but it's not coming to mind, so I guess we'll move on to the next one.
Okay.
So, who are some of the most influential figures both in your life as well as your musical career?
Uh, music wise, um, it's funny because I know that my style of music won't necessarily sound like the things that I'm about to say.
Sure.
Um, huge Prince fan, huge Prince fan, and have done a lot of very deep dives on just like I think obsessing and hyper fixating on like his right hand playing the whole musicology record. I was listening to that earlier this week. That might be the biggest like mood changing album. Like if I'm wake up on the wrong side of the bed and I'm like, I need to listen to something that's gonna put me in a different, my headspace. That's
Yep.
my go-to. Big John Mayer fan. I love Pink, and especially a lot of her early stuff is just. And I mean, even her more recent stuff, she doesn't mess up. She's great. Um, and big Eminem fan,
Mm.
and yeah, kind of my musical tastes go kind of all over the place, but
I share in that sentiment because my you if you saw my music playlist with over 1,000 songs on it, you would look at it and you'd be like, what goes on in this man's brain on a day to day basis? Because I will go from country gospel to punk to heavy metal back to rap to and then back into R&B. It's all over the place,
yeah, yeah.
royally so.
Yeah, no, same here. Same here. And then, I go through phases where I'm like, oh, this old country song that's just, it's musically, it's super simple, but how it's put together is just, and
It's the
yeah,
best.
it is. Yeah, So I think and I play music a lot. So I think that there's also a level of, um, like playing downtown. Have you ever been to Nashville?
I have not yet. It's on the docket.
Okay. So downtown, there's like a bunch of bars, and they all play. It's all cover bands,
Yeah.
and I think that sometimes it can feel a little repetitive depending on what kind of gigs you're playing and stuff. And sometimes it's just a lot of stimulation with music. So for me to really want to listen to music, I'm like, okay, how weird can can we throw on some Mr. Bungle or something just to like wake the brain up and be like, oh, what is happening? But yeah.
The I'll tell you as my music I wouldn't say obsession, but I would say the kick that I've been on lately has been um what people would say is slowed down and with reverb added. Have you stumbled into a bunch of those lately? I,
I don't think so.
I
Maybe.
know for some reason it seems to be like a huge trend on TikTok. They'll pull like good, nice popular songs and slow it
Hmm.
down by like, and then they'll pitch it down by like 3 to 4 keys, not changing the tempo, and then it just gives it this totally different feel.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know why, but I've been on a kick like that lately. So,
Nice. I'll have to check that out. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this on the podcast, but I don't TikTok all that often.
oh no,
I know. Sorry. I have a TikTok. I do post it. I think which is gonna this sounds old, but like I feel like TikTok, I couldn't figure out how to get the app to work in my head, really, So Instagram has been my main focus as a platform for quite a while. And I mean I Facebook, stuff translate.
yeah,
That's, a lot of the people that when I was with when Ziona Road was touring a lot, the sibling trio I was in, and when we were on the road a lot, that was kind of our main platform. because at the time when that started, that was the main platform, which is aging me a little bit. Not actually, but I started this when I was really young. Uh, but yeah, so Facebook and Instagram have always kind of, yeah, those are kind of my Instagram mainly been the
And I can't really say I blame you either, because in talking to some pretty big people over at TikTok and people that I consider friends of mine, you might have heard of Davide Del Monte. Of course, you got the legendary Bobby Waters
yeah,
and
he's
and
great.
all of them. Yeah, it's the TikTok can be confusing sometimes, and I know the algorithm can be crazy too to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of hit the content thing a little later. I feel like there's a lot of people now in music who maybe got that down and then did the live show stuff second,
Hmm.
and started on the internet and then like did I know a lot of people. I've played for some people who got record deals because of TikTok,
Hmm.
and which is awesome. I've pretty much only been in live show world for most of my musical career.
Sure. Yeah.
I've done a fair amount of session stuff every now and then, and I've been able to be a part of some other people who I did a video with Bobby and Peter and Big Brev and stuff a while ago, and it's really cool to work with those guys. They're all super talented. Um, and talking to them was super helpful too, because it's like that's like their world. They're dialed in on that, and that is a world that I feel like I've been playing catch up on a little bit. You
Sure,
know?
yeah. Well, and it's kind of tough to survive too, because
Yeah.
I mean, you already got the algorithm working against you sometimes,
Yeah.
and sometimes you'll just have that random, I would say, piece of content, if you will, that just hits it just right and takes off, and before long you're Bobby Waters.
Right.
But I mean,
Yeah. It's weird. It's something I haven't really figured out. I do post consistently and I've been a little more intentional with it in the last year, especially. But I've probably averaged somewhere between 275 and 300 shows a year since I moved to town. And yeah. And so that's been my energy and focus has definitely been that world. And
oh,
so
absolutely. And
kind of
another
trying to sit
thing,
back and check out. Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say, it just in live performance, and the cool thing is like, although it may feel like you're running behind, I know live performances at the end of the day are the one thing that has gotten us through up until technology's made the advancement where you can share it like that.
Right.
I mean, it really doesn't dictate how good you are if you don't have a good following yet. Because I've seen, I mean, on paper you have a few thousand on Instagram, right? Is that correct? Or how many do you
Yeah,
have?
yeah, I think I'm almost to like 7,000 ish on Instagram.
See, and
Facebook, I just made a face. This is embarrassing. Uh, I did so I had like my regular profile was set to public, so people could follow me on my regular profile,
sure.
but I couldn't link things to my regular profile. I had to have an artist page, and so I
Okay.
did make an artist page. So I had a few thousand followers on my like personal Facebook, and then I just started on an artist page like
Yeah.
6 months ago.
Yeah. And I'm like, when I was sitting there doing a little bit of a deep dive before formally inviting you here on the channel, I'm sitting here thinking, my God, why does she not have more followers than she does? And I'm like, Jesus, this voice is crazy.
Thank you.
But
I appreciate it.
um but all that aside, it kind of all here having you on explaining that now makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I think also, so I worked with the sibling trio thing. That was my main focus for quite a number of years. And then that, we still play together every now and then. We just, my sister got married. She lives in Florida, and she still comes to town and play shows and stuff. We're just not doing as much as like the three of us. But my brother and I still work together pretty much on a weekly basis. He plays bass for me a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I was kind of doing the social media thing, I was very focused on those pages. in those channels. And then I went through a phase. I got offered a bunch of utility player gigs for other artists. So I was like, um, I was gone. I actually gave up my lease because I was gone like 80% of the year.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, between that and everything else, I just, I was really focused on that. And then I was like, and I still love doing that from time to time, but I stopped saying yes to artist gigs because I was like, I really want to give this a go. And at some point, still eventually play. And there's still some artists that they hit me up tomorrow, I'd be like, yeah, let's go.
Hmm.
I still enjoy that, but I really wanted to kind of hone in and focus on my thing because there's a lot of avenues to make a living doing music. And I think that whatever one you kind of set your mind to, that's probably what's going to happen and what you put your energy into. And
Absolutely.
more of certain types of gigs turn into more of that kind of gig. So,
Yep. And plus, people find out you're good at something, they're going to be reaching out in droves.
there's not a whole lot of there's some really great utility players out there. There's not a ton of players that play fiddle and other instruments. And so I got hit up for um a lot of gigs because of that. Which I am super grateful for, and I did enjoy playing those. I just was like, I feel like the season was approaching for a while, and I was like, this is the time where I'm just gonna do my thing for a while and
Yep.
lean into it.
And you're clearly getting somewhere.
It's going really well. It's going really well. Um, I love it. It's a lot of fun, and it's fun to, like putting out my own stuff. It's like that's me. I was one that, I had co-writers and stuff on, and I worked with some really cool people to help engineer and produce and play on it. But it's like the thing that I had in my head came out, and it was exactly like the thing I had in my head without a whole lot of the, you know, when you're in a band, it's like, okay, well, everybody kind of has to agree on things. And this was like, nah, I don't have to agree with that with myself. That's it. So,
Just me, myself, and I have to approve. And once I approve, it's golden, right?
right, right. And if it sucks, that's all on me too, which is fine.
It's a all of your eggs in one basket kind of situation.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So, in your social media life, what people may see could be different from some of the things they may not know a lot about you. So, this next question kind of goes based off of that. Is there anything that you haven't yet shared in this kind of social media life, music life, that some people might not know about you yet? Like, it could be a fun fact, it can be something serious.
Uh, I did show one post of this, I think I did, but I was super into ventriloquism growing up.
Ah,
And yeah, that's been something I've kind of thought about maybe posting more of because that one video people did seem to like it. And I got a lot of people who there was a manager at one of the venues I work at who was like, "Oh, I can see you." He's like, "That kind of makes sense that you're into that, you know?" Like he's like, really cool. He's like, I had a random Saturday night off and it was around Halloween and I, painted half of my face into some skull or something like that. Or Joker, I think I was the Joker. And I was just, I have a lot of weird hobbies. So I've thought about
the word weird is subjective.
right. I mean, it didn't make me probably the most popular person in high school, but it works out well now. I do.
Everybody knew who I was in high school, and I mean that didn't make me popular. It's just like I was. It was one of the situations where people knew who I was, but some people looked at me and they were like, "That dude's weird." And I'm like, "Okay." I mean,
Yeah.
I'll fully agree. I'll fully accept it, right?
Yeah. It's fun to kind of grow into it and be like, oh yeah, she's pretty weird. But somehow it kind of works.
Yeah, it
Now,
kind of works, right?
kind of works.
That's the good
So,
feeling.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm really into ventriloquism. I like things I don't I feel like music is pretty it's a lot of my life. So if I have a day off, I have a guitar that sits around all the time and I'll just noodle around on that, or I have a dog. We go hiking a lot or outside a fair amount. I box for fun. That's
You
that's kind of a
box.
fun
That's
one.
cool.
Yeah. Um, and and then I go back to the ranch every now and then. I haven't shown a whole lot of that on my social media because I think in some ways it makes sense to me because I've lived it, but like I grew up in the middle of nowhere on a buffalo cattle operation and I
Sure.
like milking cows and uh that whole that whole world, which this doesn't scream ranch kid from South Dakota sometimes, but uh you know, I thought about posting more.
Guys, sorry about that. We had a bit of a technical difficulty, but we are back. So, where did we leave
Sweet.
off?
Uh
You were
I think
talking
we were just talking about
about,
content. Yeah,
yeah,
different
the,
content ideas.
yeah. You had mentioned that you were discussing content about from where you came from, like out there at Buffalo Cattle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Which there is a little bit of that on there, but it's not necessarily um a focused or planned out part of uh content for me. You
sure.
know, a lot of it is live shows and um goofing off on stage. So
So I feel like, and so I kind of wanted to mention this because ventriloquism has always kind of like piqued my interest despite my inability to do it. It seems like it's a science kind of in order to really achieve a good ventriloquist performance, I guess you could say.
yeah, I think that as I'm gonna nerd out.
Go for it.
I think that like I put it away for a number of years. I actually do have a couple of puppets that I do pull out every now and then. They live in my closet. But I think that my favorite part of it is once you like develop the characters, like each puppet kind of has like their own thing. I kind of view it almost as like an actor playing a character. Like that's like a separate entity of like
Sure.
that's like a being. And yes, like I'm the one saying the things, but once you can kind of get into the thing of like, you know, there's me and my personality, I'm talking, and then there's like Duke is one of my puppets and he's got his own personality and the things that he would say and the things that his you know character and quirks and all those kinds of things. And once you can kind of like do it enough to where you can flip back and forth where it's like, oh, like he's not going to say something that I would necessarily say, you know, because it's
Yeah.
like uh person or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've thought about getting like I it's only for fun. Um but I have thought about, you know, be fun to do like a stand-up night or something. I don't know. I don't know if I would I don't know if I'm actually going to get into that. I could see that at some point in my life though, being like a fun little side hobby.
I'm sure that would work well for you.
It'd be fun.
I will say I feel like my first official exposure to ventriloquism, and I feel this is probably like a cheap exposure. I don't know how realistic it is, but do you remember Victorious from the Nickelodeon channel?
I did not really grow up with a TV, so I
I
don't
gotcha.
know a lot of those, but it's
There
probably
may
why I did
be
so much ventriloquism. But
there may be some viewers that are familiar with the show that I'm talking about, but I would have to say that's probably my first official exposure to ventriloquism outside of
okay,
like your standard stand-ups that people do.
great, yeah,
But
yeah.
I've
My-
always been fascinated by that.
oh yeah, me too. My first exposure to it was it was like a vacation Bible school or something that I was at when I was like 7, and the pastor's wife did a ventriloquist like section of like the play or whatever, and I was like, "That's the coolest thing in the world," and just kind of went from there.
Just giving life to something that has none, right?
Yeah, but yeah. So those are some of the hobbies.
So something that I also wanted to kind of derail a little bit and ask you about in short form was can you kind of go into a little bit of some of the cattle life that you lived prior to your music career? I know that's some people, for some transparency, might not know what it might be like, and I'm sure they might be wondering. I know I'm wondering myself what that kind of life is kind of like, especially growing up.
Yeah, it was a really cool way to grow up. We lived in the middle of nowhere, you know. It's like, I don't know, 20 miles of gravel to get to where my folks' place is.
Wow.
And we were like 2 hours away from a town that had like a McDonald's or Walmart. Yeah, it was out there. But it was cool, you know. I think that growing up working with livestock and um the like resiliency factor that's kind of built into that lifestyle, I think has served me really well in music because the long hours and it's kind of hard on your body sometimes, and the ability to kind of put your comfort aside and just do something even when you don't feel like it. Um, it was really good for me. You know, I grew up my schedule growing up was like wake up and go milk cows and then come back in and get to school, and we did a lot of building fences and working livestock, and it's a cool way to grow up. Very cold up there. Very cold. I wouldn't That would be hard for me to move back into because I'm very used to the South at this point. But
Did you deal much with severe weather?
oh yeah.
Is South Dakota? It's in the tornado alley, right?
We didn't really have there was like baby no, we're not. But
No. Okay.
we there was maybe like 3 that I remember growing up, and none of them were near us necessarily, but they do get some really gnarly storms, like we had one storm that came through in like 2010, 11. I might be off on that on my years. But anyway, um it dumped like feet of snow, and we were actually we lost power for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So like, for that 2 weeks we were like making food on a wood stove and you know eating the
Back to
house.
the back to the really old ways without a power, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, it was a cool way to grow up, you know. I can credit a lot of, I think that, there's a playing music for 12 hours is exhausting and it's really long days and things like that, but it's still easier than, work in Buffalo and negative 30 degrees for 12 hours, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but it was cool. I love going back. I do. And kind of getting to like step back into that world. I miss livestock,
Um,
um, big animals, and yeah. So
Quite a simple lifestyle, though, from what I understand.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think that there's a lot of different, factors that get kind of overlooked in that kind of lifestyle, like the amount of just like skills you need to survive up there. Um, it's definitely a different world, but it's very like it's very like peaceful in a sense, even though it can be pretty harsh conditions and things like that.
Sure.
um, you know it's a lot slower paced than you know doing the touring thing and going from city to city, and you're around
Mm.
hundreds of different people every day when you're on tour, and uh that's not the case up there. So I can appreciate a lot of if I need to get out, if I'm like, hey, I just need a week off to just, kind of disappear. It's a nice place to disappear to.
It seems like it would be.
So, yeah.
Do you have I would say, I guess we would call it a core memory? Like, do you have something that sticks in your head from that time period of your life where you'll be like, I will never forget that as long as I live? Could be good,
Um,
bad, funny.
so one of my best friends growing up was a cow named Anne. She was an orphan, and that was super fun. I don't remember how I was probably 12-ish, 13, and she was kind of like my like responsibility. So I had to like, make a bottle, go feed her.
Yep.
and she was super tame, and she's actually still alive. She's a very, very old cow.
Oh wow.
Um, but she was really cuddly, and we were, could go down, and it's funny because it's like a cow, so she's huge. But um, yeah, yeah, I love going back and hanging out and getting to see her. And she's like, as a kid, we just go hang out in the barn for a long time, and I think I slept in the barn a couple times actually with her.
That
Um, and yeah, it was cool. We had
sounds
horses
awesome.
and all that, and it was fun.
It's awesome because not only did you really have like a responsibility to kind of build that adult kind of feeling in you as a kid, but really just having someone, or I guess you could say someone in a light sense, but having someone to kind of spend time with, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm from a big family, so there's, quite a few of us to hang out with. But yeah, it was really fun to have, I think most people, it's like, oh, this is my like pet cat or turtle. And I was like, this is my pet cow.
I have a cow.
He's awesome. Yeah. Every now and then I'll get selfies from my dad because he'll like take a selfie with my cow and send it to me. And it's really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's awesome to hear that she's still kicking too.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. He sent me one. I was on stage at Whiskey Row. This was a few months ago, and he sent me a selfie with my cow, and I got the text. I saw my phone sitting there, and my dad texted me. I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh, guys, you guys want to see my cow? This is my dad and my cow." And yeah,
Bit of a party trick, not necessarily a trick,
yeah,
but
kind
I have a
Yeah.
cow.
I have a cow.
That's
She's
awesome.
very cuddly.
Token of my previous life, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So I know you mentioned you went into this just a little bit earlier, but you what exactly do you do in your off time? I know you kind of spend a lot of time performing and recording and such, but what are some things that you enjoy doing outside of that? I know you mentioned ventriloquy.
Uh, yeah, I mean, my like day to day, I work a lot, which I love working, so it never usually feels like work. But my normal week, I'll probably have anywhere from 3 to 6 gigs in a week. I try not to do more than that. I've gone through phases of doing more than that, and it's just a lot of work and hard on your body.
Mm-hmm.
But usually I'll do that. I play, and then like, I think that there's so much behind the scenes work too. Yeah, I mean, like content creation takes up a lot of time.
It does.
I co-write a lot, and so constantly trying to create new material and figure out what's next is always a constant. I think in a lot of artists' brains is it's like, okay, cool, well, we have this done. Like I've got handful of singles that I have a few singles that are like mastered, ready to go that I'm thinking about for the next how I'm gonna roll those out. And then I'm in the studio recording 3 more right now, and then writing for whatever 3 more are that are gonna be after that for, end of the year kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time in that world of things because there's just, and then I do a fair amount of corporate and private events and things like that. So,
Sure.
I kind of
Yeah.
set like hours for myself of like, okay, here's my like work week is Thursday through Sunday is when I'm gigging. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are catch up on everything else of, um, you know, emails, text, scheduling out content, you know, all the other work that goes into, I spent like 3 hours yesterday working on spreadsheets. Um, so yeah,
It really does take up a lot of time just doing what you do, and even content creation. It's to bear sometimes.
it is, but it's also kind of fun because it's like all the, if you kind of unlock the inner child in you that's like, oh, what about this idea that we could just like, that sounds ridiculous when you maybe verbalize it, but it's like, that might make a really cool music video concept, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of these things sit in my brain for a couple months before I actually act on them because I want to make sure that it's like the thing. I sat on my own material for quite a while and just like reworked it because I knew what I wanted and I wanted to make sure and like kind of uh you know just have it honed into a level where it was like, no, this is for sure me, you
Yeah,
know? And so and I kind of approach that with a lot of things where everything is pretty intentional.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah.
So, um, circling back to music and singing a little bit, I know
Yeah.
you obviously do some great vocals. So I know, and
Thanks.
this is something that I like to ask a lot of the um singers here that pop in. Do you have any go-to like warm-up routines, or do you warm up much at all? What kind of go into what your warm-up routine looks like any given
Um
day?
yeah, so like playing downtown, it's 4 hours of in one. You don't get a break or anything like that. It's 4 hours singing straight through. Um and yeah, it can be kind of a beast. So my I will do like the like thing or whatever,
Yeah, lip
and a few of
trills.
those. Yeah. But for the most part, my warm up is the first however many songs in my set. Um, I kind of like to set a tone with that down there. And so like my first 20 minutes of the set is all things that are pretty easy to sing that warm up the lower and the higher end of my range gently. I don't like come out, you know, guns blazing, being like, let's do heart now.
Yeah.
I try to ease into that. Um, and yeah, so that's a lot of kind of like trying to manipulate the set list into where when those song requests come in and then people are like, oh, can she sing Evanescence? And then I'm like, okay, cool, let's not do that in the first song. Yeah, I have before, and I'm just really careful. I'm very aware of um it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Exactly.
Um
And I know how much time do you typically spend on your like routines? You spend a few minutes. How does that
yeah,
look for
usually
you?
it's like in the car on my way to my gig.
Okay, I
Um
got you.
and then and I also work with a lot of other people that sing too. And so I'll kind of warm up by like singing harmonies for them because harmonies are not, you know, it's not as much effort. And so
Sure.
it's a nice way to kind of get things flowing. And yeah,
Yeah, I've always kind of thought that too because I've never really performed per se on like a in a live stance. I know I've kind of done like little group stuff, but I've always
yeah,
found that to be the case for me too. It's just the harmonies seem to do really good for the sessions where you need to warm up.
yeah, yeah. And if I'm doing a vocal day in the studio, I will do like a full 20-minute, I've got a couple files from some different vocal coaches that I worked with. Um, and I'll just like kind of sing along with those in the car or something like that.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, but for like regular downtown shows or like shows on the road and things like that, a lot of it is just I'm aware of how I'm singing for especially that first hour, or first 20 minutes or whatever is, you know, it's easy to hurt your voice if you're not careful. And so just going into it with a little more intention and I've been doing it a long time, you know. I've been playing
yeah,
music full time for a decade. So,
sure, yeah.
um yeah.
And if you don't mind me asking, I forgot to ask this earlier, but how old are you now?
I'll be 27 in April.
You are just a little bit ahead of me as far as months.
Yeah.
I'm
When's your
I'm in
birthday?
October 5th.
Gotcha. Cool.
So
Eh,
yeah, I was curious about that. I was like, how old is she? Because I had no idea. I couldn't tell, and I wasn't gonna guess.
Smart.
I know better than
Uh
that.
yeah, smart. Um no, I've been doing like growing up, I we Ziona Road started playing gigs. I think I was 15. the first time I played like a gig, it was like a bar gig somewhere, I think. And we did like music competitions and stuff. I don't remember my first time on stage. I did like violin recitals when I was like 6, and my whole family was musical. So like as a family, like my folks were involved as well, and
Yeah.
I was playing shows and performing all through, middle school and even before that. Um, but playing music full time, like that being my main, income and work, it's been a decade.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, it's
Been
cool.
a full decade of love and hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of like, what's going on? But it's fun. Every
It's
day's different.
every day is different, and that's one of my favorite things about being a content creator and just being
Yeah,
in this space of music and YouTube. It's just no day's ever the same. No content is ever the same.
yeah, yeah.
It's awesome.
Keeps everything pretty fresh.
It does. In that 10 years, this is a good segue into my next question. In that 10 years, do you have any tips or life hacks that you might have drummed up with that knowledge and experience that you'd like to share with anyone that currently sings or wants to sing in the future?
Um, no is gonna come a lot. It's gonna be a thing. And I think that I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Mark Manson. Um, but it was like, I'm gonna butcher this quote right now, but it's like, you know, most people fail, like most of the more successful people in life fail more times than most of the population even tries, you know? And I think that, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of that. And I think that you know, no is not a bad thing. And um and also like I think that a lot of performers have like perfectionist mindsets. That's not a I wouldn't say that's a bad thing either. Um, but don't let it stop you from just doing, you know? Like sometimes you just got to show up and do it, and you're uncomfortable, and maybe that day was not your best day, and then you move on because there's going to be there's been so many times where I've been, banking on a specific, gig or a show or a run or whatever, and something fell through, and it sucks and it hurts your ego. And um, maybe it was your fault, maybe it wasn't. Um, and also, a lot of times when that happens, I'm really bummed out about it. And then something else popped up that wouldn't have been an option had I taken the first thing, you know?
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of faith in the idea that it's gonna pan out. And almost like an ignorance to the idea that it's not going to pan out,
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that going into it, no is not a bad thing. It just is. And being able to, you know, work your way through the disappointments in it, because there are disappointments in it. And that one gig is not going to make or break your life, you know?
I think that's a really good point to make too, because I think there's something to be said for the amount of times that you're told no. Sometimes that door never opens because there's a better door waiting for you down the road.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Um, just having the faith that in the thing that you're creating, and also something that kind of hit me in the last couple of years, like it's okay that your music or your style is not going to be everybody's thing, and it's okay, you know, like I've heard from plenty of people throughout my life of where, whether I was singing different genre or whatever, we're like, I don't know if that's like, you know, you grew up on a ranch. Why aren't you, singing country stuff? And I love country music, but that's not the thing that I wanted to make on my own and the thing that feels real to me.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's like, what is the thing that feels the most authentic to you? And that's going to be the thing that, and maybe some people aren't going to like it, and maybe some people will. And the people who it's not their cup of tea, that's okay. because there's a lot of other people who it will be their cup of tea.
And see, that's the thing too, is that not only that, you will find more true fans being your authentic true self,
Absolutely.
and rather doing something you're not necessarily cut out to be. That's not the phrase I'm looking for. It's something that not only you like to do, but it feels like you're meant to be in, because they found out that that's what you do best and that's what you enjoy. That's your authentic self. They're gonna eat that up.
Totally. Absolutely. And it's not an insult if it's not someone's cup of tea, you know?
It's one of those things where we have to fully accept the fact that not everyone is the same. Not everyone has the same interests,
Right. Which is
and
beautiful,
it is.
you know?
That's one of the best things in life.
Right. And, there's a bunch of different genres and a bunch of different artists. I'm probably not going to put out a polka record. And if you exclusively listen to polka music, I'm not your girl.
Hmm.
Um, but there's some great albums out there and great players that's their thing, and there is a fan base for it. And that's, part of the internet is you can actually access those fan bases now,
Yeah,
you know, and and they can find you, and it's cool.
it's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Segue. I've kind of run out of questions at this point, but that doesn't mean we're done just yet.
Okay.
So now that we've kind of reached the end of the list of the questions that I traditionally do here on the channel, our next item on the agenda is to give a couple minutes to kind of breathe from me asking you questions. And what we're going to do is let you do a self plug, let us know what you got going on in your life, advertise as you see fit. You get as much time as you want for the next couple minutes to do that. Just kind of tell us what you got
Sweet.
going on.
Putting out more music. I'm actually working on that tomorrow, so I'll have a set release date that I will release soon. You can find me evamaxine.com. All my social medias are I am Eva Maxine. Yeah, lot of music, coming out. And if you're ever in town, I'm probably playing a show. So my schedule's on my website, so feel free to check that out. I'm going into the studio tomorrow during the day to record 3 more songs, and yeah, gonna have a whole bunch of music coming out.
You
And
got a busy
it's
year, yeah?
yeah, yeah, and it's a lot more of the, Pink meets Paramore,
That's going to
slightly
be fun.
unhinged girl vibe. So it's fun.
It sounds like it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this year a lot. It kind of felt like it had a slow start, which is not real because it wasn't slow. I worked almost every day and it was great. I took 2 weeks off in the beginning of the year. But then other than that, I've been working pretty much every day. So hasn't actually been a slow start to the year, but it's picking up. It's gonna be picking up a lot. So
Oh, yeah,
keep
for
an
sure.
eye out. Maybe more ventriloquist videos. We'll see. That's
Depends.
that's that's still up for debate, but
Hey, so it's like you said, there's an audience.
there's an audience. I do follow a couple of ventriloquists on Instagram, and they're so entertaining. The algorithm knows me well.
It does. But guys, I will have her information in the description, website, social media, all the jazz. So make sure you go check everything out post video if you're here this long.
Sweet. Cool. Anything else?
I do have one little section that I like to kind of go into before I wrap up every podcast with my guests, and sometimes I
Cool.
like to do it. I like to give them like maybe at most an hour heads up. Sometimes I kind of drop it on them last minute. But what this next little section is before we wrap up is, since I asked them to come on and I asked them all these questions, I give them a minute to breathe and then think about anything they might want to ask me that they might be curious about before obviously we close down the interview. So if there's anything that comes to mind like over the next little bit that you want to kind of pitch my direction and know about me, you have the time to do that.
I mean, so we didn't know each other before meeting up on this podcast. I'm curious. I mean, I'm not going to ask you every single question that you asked me, but I mean, I'm game. We have time.
Yeah.
Uh, like, how did you get into this? Where did you start?
Pretty humble beginnings.
Okay.
I really started with the goal in mind back in 2022 to really just help elevate everyone's understanding of music. And I wanted to do that through the lens of interviewing people like yourself and learning more about their journey through life and how they got to where they got in their career. And obviously I have more content than just these podcasts. I
Yeah.
do reaction
Yeah.
and analysis videos similar to other people like the charismatic voice and Peter Barber, but
Yeah.
and that's something that a lot of people like to hear. But I
Hmm.
really got into, I really wanted to focus on this whole podcast thing because not only did I find it fascinating learning how everyone got to where they got in the music industry, but specifically I wanted everyone else to learn more about the artists that are out there and just
Mm.
understand that particular artist's music in turn by knowing their story.
Yeah.
And it kind of took off at the very beginning. I was fortunate enough to start off with some pretty big people.
Cool.
I remember Bobby Waters was, I think he was my third guest,
Cool.
and um, and obviously he has a pretty large following. It was kind of humbling to me at the very beginning. I mean, sure, it might not have been as humble as some other people, out here on social media, but it's it was a really just a drive to help people understand music and the people behind the music.
Yeah. That's really cool.
And
That's really
it
cool. Did you grow up playing and
so
being around?
yes, I grew up around guitar. I know that my dad, my mom and my dad never really were too musically inclined. My dad did
Hmm.
definitely play guitar, and I did eventually pick up guitar when I was probably about 7 or 8. But I wasn't faithful to it, unfortunately.
Okay.
But it was kind of one of those mixed bag situations where you kind of do, but you kind of don't at the same time.
Yeah.
But there was always that passion for it ever since I would have to say probably middle school band. I would say that's
Uh,
probably where my initial music curiosity was piqued. I
yeah.
saw this opportunity to join the band because, and I kind of did, and obviously I futzed my way through the 6th through 8th grade, not really knowing what I was doing, and get into high
Yeah.
school and actually start taking it seriously.
Cool.
And I remember when I played trombone all those years, not really caring that much about music, I really found myself musically. I found that I actually did care about music a lot.
Cool.
And whenever I kind of had that epiphany, there was something that my dad said to me back when he was trying to teach me guitar and I was belligerent and oblivious. I was like, he was sitting down with me and I'm like, I don't do too well sitting for too long at that age. I get a little bit antsy. I have
Hmm.
undiagnosed ADHD, so I get antsy.
Yeah.
And,
Same.
but I never, yeah, it's a
Same.
struggle sometimes.
Yeah. No, I get that.
And but there was something that he said to me that really stuck with me ever since I had that epiphany, and it was this. He said, "You've got the ear for it, you're just not doing anything with it." And I didn't realize how profound that was until I had that moment back in high school. And it turns out years later that I didn't even realize that I had an ear for things.
Hmm.
People have run tests by me. They're like, "What's this note?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's an E." They're like, "How did you do that just so easily?" And I'm like, "For me, it just came naturally."
You were one of those dudes that has perfect pitch right off the bat.
I that's what they call it. I wouldn't
That's
say it's
cool.
perfect, but
That's really cool.
I,
My, that's that's a skill that it's. I've been around a lot of musicians and a lot of singers and people that some of them just have that, and it's really hard to train in if you don't have it.
from what I understand, it is. When I talked to Peter back earlier in the podcast series, I think he had mentioned that where you can kind of have, to a certain extent, a trained perfect pitch.
Mhm.
So the way the way you describe that, it makes sense now.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, you can, it's just really difficult to do. I used to be okay at it when I was playing violin, but, uh, then I took gigs half step down, which is like all the instruments are tuned half step down, and that totally it's gone now. I
Mhm.
can't I could probably get it back, but it's and I didn't have perfect pitch. I could only tell you like what an E was, and then I could go based on that step
Sure,
either
yeah.
way. Do the whole like do re mi fa sol la ti do thing.
Mhm. And that's something I feel like it's almost like you'd have to train to a certain extent for a fretless instrument, like you had mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, there's a couple different ear training apps out there too that I think can help it, but that's a cool skill. You're
Yeah,
very lucky for that. That's cool.
yeah, and I didn't, and to tell you how blind I was to the fact that I had it was I didn't even realize that I had this until literally senior year of high school, and I'm 26 now. It's only been 7 years.
Wow.
Funny.
How Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it. I was just gonna say it's funny.
Yeah. Um, how did you get connected with like Peter and Bobby, and how did you find, my page?
So, in long story short, the way I got through to Peter, Bobby, that side is that I kind of was already in a I wouldn't say a society, but like more of like a community that they were in. Have you ever heard of Discord?
Yeah,
Um,
maybe.
so I'm
Yes.
on like a Discord server. It's kind of like a page where a bunch of people can talk about stuff.
Okay.
It's supposed to be like a gaming communication kind of platform, but
Okay.
people use it for all kinds of communication.
Cool.
I was in in what's called the Bass Singing Nation. It's a community of like thousands of like people that advocate for like bass singers and just singing in general. And Peter, Bobby, and a few other people were there. And I
Okay.
remember some of those wonderful people were part of the initial run of viewers that would watch my content whenever I very started at the beginning of YouTube journey.
Cool.
And that's actually how I got in touch with Peter, and that's how we've become close friends over the past couple years. Is really that channel and just kind of
Hmm.
having this same love for singing and particularly really bass notes.
Yeah. Cool.
And then there was that, and then the way I found you in particular is funnily enough through the work that you did with Brev, Bobby, and Peter.
Yeah.
So that's
Cool.
that's where I found you. And after
Cool.
that, I heard the voice and I had to do a deep dive, and I knew I had to get you on at some point.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out.
I'm glad that
This
you
is cool.
decided to pop in.
Yeah, this is super cool.
And it's just that passion for showing people what that artist story is and where they came from. It's awesome to me.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. It's very, I mean, it's it's funny to yeah, I love doing stuff like this and just like conversations and meeting people and talking and all that. I love all that, but I think that there's um it's really helpful when there's other people that can give you a platform and give you a time to just, you know, promote it and get it out there and talk about it. And I think you spend a lot of time being like, "Oh, I hope this is good. Let me just like create this thing." And then when it comes to like getting it into the world, it's nice to see other people excited about it. It's kind of, a nice reminder that like, oh, maybe you're not insane.
Mm-hmm. And
But
it's another thing cool. It's just like not only do you get to meet these really cool people, but these really cool people that are really nice, even like that have huge platforms. Obviously
mhm,
you got the people that I previously mentioned. They're some of the most down to earth people you've ever met in your
yeah,
entire life, and you can level set with them on this one thing that you both love, and that's music and singing. And it's
yeah,
just it's a really cool experience.
yeah, yeah. It's the amount of connection that does come through social media is really cool, and you can get. It's just cool. It's cool to meet people who are, doing the same thing and you can all be nerds together and be like, "Oh my goodness." When I was singing with those guys, it was so fun because I come from my whole family, my dad and all my brothers have very low bass voices. And
Mm-hmm.
sitting there, I like went over to they were staying in an Airbnb for the stairwell singing thing. And
Yes.
before we went down there, we were talking, and I'm just listening to these three guys. Oh, we're talking like this. And never am I in a room like that, except like Thanksgiving when I go home and my dad and all my brothers talk like that too. But I remember sitting there and I think I even said it to Bobby. I was like, oh my God, this is really, it's like kind of deja vu. I know don't know all these guys all that well at that time, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's, yeah. And then, you get to be nerds and be like, oh, can you do this? The subharmonic stuff is
I I love
so cool.
subharmonics. I have to admit, I have to yield, and I have to say that I love subharmonics because it's just such a cool vocal register thing that you can just use to extend your range, even though it's not really part of your range. Fascinating.
Right. Yeah, it's super fun. We've had Bobby and I have had some conversations about that and then like screaming because that's something I do and that I got really into, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the extent of what the voice is capable of if you can figure out how to like the right technique to kind of unlock the certain vocal tricks. It's a fun
Mm-hmm.
party trick,
It
you
is
know.
absolutely a fun party trick.
But
I remember, and I won't go into this one much because I know you probably have some more things you want to, but I will remember. I always remember. I'll never forget this. I remember going through and just talking to a bunch of really cool people, as Peter being one of them, and I was trying to find myself in the sense that I didn't really know where my voice landed. I was in this long perpetual time of confusion where I didn't know
mm,
what my voice was capable of, partially because I just didn't give it the time of day like it really deserved to kind of figure out where it lied. But I remember as I was discovering kind of who I was, I remember I'll never forget. I remember initially being upset that I was not a bass voice whenever I had been told that by multiple people. And that was my inner child because from a teenager, I wanted to be a bass singer
yeah.
because, for some reason I just had this fascination surrounding low voices. But I've kind of accepted it now because I know that, and you probably recognize this in talking to me, but very definitely a baritone. And I've
Mhm.
recently accepted that, and I'm finally starting to branch out and understand my voice and what it's capable of. And it's pretty awesome. I have to talk.
Yeah. Getting to the point to being able to lean into, I think in order to kind of lean into like what it is capable of, it's really important to lean into like the thing that you know you can do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, um, there was a long time where I knew I could sing, but I didn't necessarily like identify myself as a singer when
Sure.
people would talk to me. But I sang and stuff, but like my tone, I didn't love listening to myself sing. And like just the tone or whatever. And in my head it was because like I'm like, oh my goodness, there's all these like, you know, Martina McBride or Adele or these like crazy high vocalists that can like do these like wild things or whatever. And it kind of took a while to um take a step back and be like, oh no, like that's not my thing. My voice doesn't do that thing because I have a fairly low voice for a girl.
Sure.
Um, but I like once I kind of listening to Pink, I think is the best example and really going through her records of like where her and she's a phenomenal singer.
Yeah.
Just it's just a different style of it, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
once I kind of into that where I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to sing like, I don't have a Carrie Underwood belty high voice. I can and I've learned where I can kind of do that thing. It's just my own version of it. And it might be a couple steps lower than the original key on the record. But
Sure. Yeah.
um, yeah, leaning into the voice that you have.
That's something I always struggled with, and I've recently come into the fact that I have a baritone lying voice, but I'm still kind of in a bit of an identity crisis as to what kind of music really fits my voice.
Mm,
And obviously there's something to be said for a type of music that you want to do, right? But there's
right.
also a type of music that really fits your voice. And I have a little bit of an identity crisis in that. Still going through that, working through it at the moment, trying to figure out,
Yeah.
what can I sing that not only I like the sound of myself in, but others can see me singing it. You know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think there's also like kind of like a magical little sweet spot in singing where, there's certain songs and certain ranges and things like that where I think the connection and the storytelling of whatever your song is, uh, maybe can get conveyed the best, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you know, I like I love country music. I grew up on it. For me, singing a lot of like 90s country, to me it doesn't feel like it like fits my voice as
sure,
well as like something that's, you know, something Pink or Paramore esque. I know I reference them all the time, but
sure,
people
yeah.
people always ask when you like are like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing original music now." They're like, "Oh, what are the three artists that it's like?" You know,
Hmm.
and the kind of the ones that I felt like fit the best.
Absolutely,
Um, but yeah, the voice is it's a cool thing.
absolutely. Anything else
But
come to mind that wanted to ask?
um, do you have original stuff out? Like, are you trying to? Are you
I don't have any original work. I really just kind of play along with duets.
cool?
That's it's fun, but I kind of do that as a I'm gonna sit in the background for right now, write it out. Might do some more lead related work, and then I might do some original work.
Cool.
Kind of playing from the back, just seeing seeing how it sounds.
Yeah, I think that's something being in Nashville as long as I've been. Like, I think a lot of projects get rushed, and a lot of there's things that you can be excited about, and maybe it is a good product, but maybe it's not like the thing that you want to do. And I kind of used a little bit my time as when I was doing the side utility guy thing, I was able to kind of do that while writing and working on my own stuff so that when I did kind of like come up with this, like, hey guys, this is the thing that I've been working on that I haven't told anyone about. Um, it wasn't something that just popped in my head and I was like, this is the thing I'm going to go with. It was
Hmm.
like being able to, keep yourself busy and really kind of marinate on what the thing is it's good. And it's good to keep busy while you're doing, you know, while you're doing that. So
Yeah, and if you ever want to take a look at anything that I've ever done, I'll send you my profile if you ever get curious.
yeah,
But
please do.
yeah,
I'd love to hear it.
yeah. Anything else sticking out that's glaring and you need to ask before we wrap up?
I'm sure that there's going to be like 12 things as soon as we hit end on this call, but
And obviously now that we're acquainted, we can always have out of podcast conversation. So if it ever
sweet.
pops up and you don't remember it now, then there's absolutely no hard feelings.
Cool. Sweet. What does your hat say?
So it says so it's technically not my hat, it's my wife's, but it says
Okay.
more espresso, less depresso.
Oh, okay. The way that it was like tilted, I couldn't see depresso. Okay, gotcha. Cool. Yep. Good hat.
Uh, my wife approves of it, and I don't remember exactly who got it for her, but I've kind of hijacked it and been wearing it for a while.
Nice. Your wife has good taste.
She
Good hat.
does. She does, and she does. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for popping in today. This has been a
Yeah, thank
huge
you.
pleasure. And guys, if you enjoyed the podcast, you enjoyed hearing about Eva's story, make sure you drop a comment down below. If you have any questions for her, or drop them below, she might pop in and answer. Who knows? And like I said, her information will be in the description, so make sure you go show her all the love in the world. And if you want to see more podcasts, you want to see more people on here, drop their names in the comments as well. I'll see what I can work out. Thank you again for watching. Love you. Take care of yourselves. See you soon. Bye.